Good morning and welcome. It is 9 a.m. We will call to order the February 7th, 2023 meeting of the Board of Supervisors, Trinity County. I'll ask Supervisor Carpenter Harris to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I open to public comment, I would just like to take a moment and welcome to our board meeting, our new interim CAO, Liz Hamilton. Appreciate her willingness to serve in these few weeks while we transition to our CAO Tuttle, who will arrive in April. So interim CAO Hamilton, I had to practice saying that a little bit yesterday. Welcome and thank you for your willingness to serve. We'll move into public comment. This time is for information for the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Do we have any public comment in the room? Okay, seeing none. Ashley, do we have any public comment on Zoom? I have Scott White.
Are you ready, board members?
Yes.
Good morning, board and chair. Scott White, Lewiston. On January 3rd, you approved our lot line adjustment, and my wife and I are very grateful that you did that. It was a good decision. We appreciate that. We have finished all the items required on our part, and while it was no fun to pay all the taxes that were due, I can say that your assessor and tax collector were professional and prompt in their dealings with us. Now that what we have required to do is done, we will provide our deeds as I told you that we would do. On January 6th, I asked planning, would you like for us or for yourselves to schedule this site visit with environmental health? Planning said that they would schedule it. On January 23rd, I asked for an update and planning again said they would schedule that meeting. Yesterday, I asked for an update and planning told us to go ahead and schedule the meeting with environmental health, which was rather frustrating because it cost us another month of time. Anyway, I contacted environmental health yesterday and I'm waiting for a response. I'm hoping they can get out this week since the weather is good. If they get it done this week, it's very reasonable to expect the notice of lot line adjustment can be completed by planning next week, which is the final step we need done. The building permit is in for our barn. I hope to be asked for it to be issued next week so we can begin construction of the barn on the 20th. I hope at this time at your meeting 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be able to report that everything is done in the barn in progress. Otherwise, I will be asking you again for your help. Thank you again for helping us to move forward. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands or chats.
All right. With that, we will close public comment and move into reports and announcements. Reports from department heads. Director Caucus.
Good morning, Panos Kokas, Director of Transportation. This is going to be a department overview as updates, and I'll have a presentation of about 20 slides, more than I want to have. However, as I was doing my presentation, I decided I need a few more just to have my point across, and I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words. In this case, maybe a few more. Having lived, grew up in a small county or in a small area, just like Trinity County, and my graduating class had 14 people, and the total school from K to 12 had 70 people. I understand what small communities are. In this presentation, I'll let you know what we do, how we pay for it, who does it. And what is our workload? And the best part of all is, how do we pay for it? Maintain approximately 692 miles of roads. And as you can tell, there's all different miles, and they're all going to add more than 692. However, those 692 miles are split in different categories. The first one, federal aid roads, as you can, let me see if I can hover on it. Right here, we have 166 miles of that, which means those are roads that we can apply for federal grants. So if there is an infrastructure bill with X number of dollars, we can apply for competitive grants so we can get money to fix those roads. We do have a project like that that's going to be coming to the board on the 22nd, and that's a high friction surface for Rush Creek Road, and that comes with federal money that's coming through the federal aid roads. The rest are local roads. That's 526. So if you add the 526 plus 166, they're going to be 692. So those two numbers add up. The local roads are the ones we cannot use federal funds. We have local funds, and I'll go through those as we go later on. We also have about 462 miles of paved roads. Now, I'll take that with a grain of salt, because some of those roads are called paved, and they don't necessarily have a pavement. They have a chip seal road, which is just oil on rock and to settle the dust or not to be muddy, so it's not necessarily paved. And we have approximately 230 miles of non-paved roads. That can be gravel, decomposing granite, clay, whatever it's on it. We have 101 bridges, 534 culverts. We also run the RTPA, the Regional Transportation Agency, Regional Transportation Planning Agency, for the future planning of transportation facilities. And that includes 4 bus routes and general aviation for 5 airports.
Can I ask a question before you move
Yes.
on? Are there really 534 culverts?
That's what we got through our data. We have a lot of culverts throughout, and I asked for it several times, 5,354. That's a lot of culverts, but it doesn't take too much on mountainous roads to have culverts in.
So there are 5,354.
Not 5,000,
culverts.
yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
misspoke. We also, as the DOT workers, are first responders in natural disasters. When a snowstorm comes in and gives us fresh snow, about 4 feet or so, or even less than that, we're the first ones to go out while everybody's in their bed, nice and warm in their house. And sometimes Mother Nature does not cooperate. As you can tell on those photographs, especially on the upper left, a tree is across the road, and we can't go to plow the rest of the road until we cut it. And the same thing happens on the photograph to the upper right. Yet the lower left shows a photograph of one of our team members with a chainsaw. He has to cut the tree in small pieces, move it out of the way before he can plow the road. That type of work is not very safe. And as we can tell, even with the best intentions and the best equipment, mishaps happening. The upper left photograph shows that a tree fell in one of our trucks. It just missed the cab. If it was a second or two slower driving through, that tree would be crashing on the cab. It's a dangerous work to go out and work during disasters and snowstorms. Those are active disasters. And we have chains on our trucks, we have trained drivers, we load them with sand and so forth. And yet, due to the ice or the adverse conditions, we can tell they can't stay on the road. And again, like I said, it's a very, very dangerous job. Our people are willing to go there because they pride themselves for their work. They are responding to the need of their neighbors, their friends, and their constituents. They don't look at it as my clients, but they are their friends and their neighbors the same way. So those are the people who are out there doing the work during emergencies. And it doesn't have to be just snow. It can be a rainstorm or any other natural event. We're the first ones out, making sure the rest of the public is safe. There are times that we can't get out on time to clear the roads because we're not that many, and we'll go through that later on. I'm not here to complain. I'm just here to educate the people what we do and what we have to do it with. So as you can tell, the lower photographs are from rainstorms. Those roads lead to somebody's house. They lead to somewhere where people have to go back and forth. If that road is out, those people cannot do their business. They cannot get out to get groceries, go to work, or whatever else they need to do. And I'm very, very empathetic about it, and I wish we could do more. But again, I can't go against the laws of nature. They tend to override anything we try to do. Of course, we don't only just deal in the immediate issues with nature. We also do a lot of repairs due to damage by nature. And here you can see a few photographs of after the fact as we try to put our facilities back into operable shape. Maybe not the best shape, but operable shape, because that's all depends on funding, staffing, resources, and so forth. And we're not only responding to emergencies, we're also doing some routine work with the money, that what we like to do rather than respond to emergencies. And as you can see on the top, we're repairing a road surface by chipping out, I think that's in Southern County, old worn out chip seal road. It's not necessarily pavement, it looks like pavement from the engineering perspective. From the public perspective, it doesn't matter what it is, as it's long, as black, and it doesn't have any loose gravel, it's paved road. And the next two slides showing again some culvert replacement and then what we call chip seal. We spray a thin layer of oil on the road, put some rocks on it, and we call it paved because it does not hold water. It may hold water, but it's not muddy and it doesn't produce any dust. The lower photograph to the right, it's a unique photograph. There are not too many counties that they have temporary bridges. We do have a temporary bridge, which is called Bailey Bridge, and we use that in cases of emergency. That bridge right now, it's used by the Forest Service as they're trying to have some deforestation to prevent future fires or removing some other equipment, other debris that they have in their area. So we are using that bridge as much as we can. Of course, when I talk about getting money for other work, which means the competitive work, this is an old bridge replacement. We have a lot of bridges that are constructed back in the turn of the century. And they're very good bridges to carry the load of the time, which was mules and mule wagons and so forth. They did not have 80,000-pound logging trucks or anything else. Some of those bridges became obsolete. And we're grateful that Caltrans and the federal highways are giving us enough funds to replace those bridges with 100% funding, so we don't have to have any matching funds. A lot of the competitive projects require at least 12% local matching funds. You're not just getting the money. However, the Highway Bridge Program, HPP, has something that's known as toll credits. They give us that to make up for the local match. So we get to recover the whole cost of the project. And we have been fortunate to replace a lot of bridges that are old, and we're in the process of trying to replace some more. It takes about 6 to 8 years to replace a bridge after we get a funding approval. And it's not that because it takes that long to design the bridge. We have to get environmental clearances that they take the majority of the time. The actual construction of the bridge, probably a year for design and 6, 8, 10 months for construction. The rest of the 8 years are trying to acquire environmental and other regulatory permits. And we spend a lot of our time going around in circles, so to speak, chasing our tail with environmental and regulatory agencies. And of course, in our routine maintenance, we install pavement markings, as you can tell with this nice little truck. It's a new truck for us. When you see the yellow lines or the white lines on the roads, they're put in by that truck. They have a computer system on it, so you can have the dashes at the right spacing based on the speed of the road, have solid white lines or solid yellow lines, or what else we need. We also maintain most of the county's fleet. As you can tell, we're not only maintaining transportation equipment, we also maintain equipment for other departments. And you can see Mr. Sullivan to the right is replacing the brakes in one of the vehicles for the sheriff. We also provide transit services and general aviation. We have 7 cutaway buses, as you can tell on that photograph. We have 4 routes. They go to Willow Creek, Redding, Hayfork, and Lewiston. And before COVID, we had about 13,300 and some passengers using our transit system. And we have 5 airports, and they're located in this slide. From those airports, Trinity Center, I believe it's the only one that's classified. The other ones are not because they don't have enough aircraft based at those airports. So as hangars become available, our policy is to rent them to those who are going to base their aircraft year-round in Trinity County, so you can get classified in those airports and be able to obtain some federal funds. If they're there for only 1 or 2 months out of the year and the rest elsewhere, we're not going to qualify. We spoke about the roads, how they're not very well constructed. Not that they're all walking trails, but let's go through the process of how is that happening. Sorry about that. Let's look at a piece of property and see what is the difference between city streets and state routes. And as you have a piece of ground, natural, what you do in the cities or subdivisions or state routes, they remove about 12, 13, 16, 36 inches of the existing topsoil, which is very good to grow things, including cannabis, almonds, tomatoes. However, it's not very good to hold loads. So that piece of soil has to be removed, and it's replaced by aggregate base or compacted gravel, because compacted gravel is not very good to grow anything. However, it's good on carrying weights. So what we are trying to do is try to have a road base that's strong enough to carry the weight that's coming over it. And in order to make that road base a little stronger, and in previous, they put about 3 to 12 inches of hot mix asphalt that came out of the plant. That came at a very high temperature. You had the right equipment to compact it, so you get a road that's going to last for 20-some years, has a good lifetime of 20 years or so without potholes. And as you drive on 299 or any place in the city streets and you say, wow, aren't those roads nice? Why isn't the one driving into Trinity County that Trinity County maintains not as good? Well, the difference is they also have closed conduits for those roads that they take the water away in the city streets. Or in the state routes, they have channels or water conveyance facilities away from the road. Now, the county roads or rural roads, they're old wagon trails or mule trails or something of that sort. And then they decided to make them a little wider. And because they're getting muddy, they figure, okay, let's put a few inches of loose gravel on it so they won't be as muddy. Well, they seem to have some more problems, so they sprayed a little oil on it, or maybe put 2 inches of chip seal on it, asphalt or something like it, not to the degree that the care was taking on the other roads. And they call them, well, those are our paved roads. And of course, if you can look at that small pocket knife and the actual thickness of those county roads, it's not much different. They're about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch at best, the thickness of them. That's what I've seen in the ground. And of course, we also have to drain those roads. In Trinity County, we don't have ditches in both sides. We may have them in one side because they're on a slip or on a slope or cliff or something or another. In the valley side, they have ditches on the side that they need to take the water away. The water doesn't go as fast as the one that goes into the pipes. And of course, once water goes in the side of the road, it doesn't matter if it's in the ditch in each side or it's seepage coming from the hill above, is going to saturate the road, is going to go underneath it. Water is good when you build a road to compact it, but once you build it, you don't want to have any water under it because it creates something that's known as potholes. With a little bit of traffic on it and some water, you get potholes. And of course, potholes don't just happen because the water came by, it's because things are driving on it. And here is the federal highways designation of vehicle damage with respect to their size. As you can tell, a car, it's 1, right? Way on the top of here, it's 1. A car, a small van, and so forth, motorcycle. As you go farther and looking at the logging trucks, that's about 2,970. So 2,970 cars need to go through to make the same damage as one 18-wheeler. So having those vehicles going on those small roads that they're saturated and they're thin, we get a phenomenon as known as potholes. That we don't seem to be able to get to them fast enough. Let's look at our Trinity workload, what we have. Here is a map of the county. And we're going to look at what is disaster damage throughout the county versus CIP. CIP means Capital Improvement Program, plans that we have to fix roads. So those red dots that just came up, it's just a typical representation, not the exact damage we have, but just in those areas to give you an overview of approximately where they are. Those are damage to the roads due to natural disasters. It could be fires, it could be floods, or it could be something else. And of course, from 2016 to 2022, we have a backlog of about 200 repair sites, costing at preliminary estimates about $25 million. And of course, Canyon Creek by itself is going to be 5 million or more. We don't know because we have not stabilized it yet and the contractor has not walked away. So this is our outstanding work, our priority 1 for what we have to repair. If we do not repair some of those storm damages on the roads throughout the county, the next storm is going to exacerbate it and the road is going to be gone and the repair is going to be way more expensive, if not impossible. And in January 2023, our initial survey shows about damage in 10 to 15 sites. I put 15 here. And we think it could be as high as $20 million. We don't know. We know the storm has gone, but the damage doesn't happen as soon as it finishes raining. We're in sloped areas where the soil is not very cohesive. We put some water on it, it gets saturated, it becomes very heavy, and the additional weight takes away part of the road. If you cut a slope that is already not very stable, put a road and put the additional weight and the rain and lack of cohesion, we're going to have damage. This is the nature's way of telling us that they don't want us there. But that's a different story. And here is the list of, let's see if this comes through. We have about 6.3 million of scheduled CIPs, capital improvement program projects, meaning things that we want to do to improve the roads. That means replacing some guardrails that are obsolete or old or need to be replaced, bridges, high friction surface, and so forth. And let's see who's doing it. DOT has 52 allocated positions, and below are the critical vacancies through the department. And why they're critical? Because you have other vacancies too, but in order for us to keep up with 25 million of disasters, we need to have some more people. Currently, we have 2 engineers. We need to have allocated 4. The extra 2 people would help us deal with FEMA. FEMA, it's a 4-letter word I don't like. They take forever. It's an insurance company. They don't want to pay you. They always want more information. You give to them, they come back and they ask for it 6 months later. So it's difficult to work with them. We also need some road maintenance workers. Remember, those are the people who plow the roads. We have, let's see this thing, how it works. It shows right here, we have a allocation of 20, we have 15. We need 5 more. People say, you haven't plowed my road in 2 days. I need to get out. I remember when I was in Eastern Montana, it would take a week to 10 days for the county plow to come by because they're so busy. Here we get to them faster. I'm not saying I intend to do the same thing, but what I'm saying is that it takes a long time because things are not as easy as we expect them because trees tend to come down all of a sudden. Their nerve, I don't know, we're trying to ply the roads. We also have a need for 2 more transit drivers. And of course, our department supports other departments with respect to administrative, engineering, environmental assistance for both developers and other departments. Developers need permits. They need to have their plans reviewed. They need plots and maps, and we're the ones who have the expertise to review them. How do we get our money?
Just one other question
Yes.
before you moved on the personnel. Do you have allocated but unfunded positions, or are all of your allocated funded?
Allocated funded.
But are all of your allocated positions funded?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
I know that's
just we can't get people to come here.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes. If anybody has questions, please interrupt me. If I get lost, I'll find my way.
Dennis, I have a question on the transit driver. You have 50% of that full. How does that affect the schedule? Has it been cut back, reduced days? I know transit's a big part of, how most people, elderly especially, move around Trinity County.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We had to cut down our transit buses from 5 days to 3 days. However, we found out that there is an issue with some school children going to Reading, and they need to have the right 5 days a week. So we still have 3 days on most of the routes, except the Reading route, to accommodate the students to go to school. So they're 5 days a week. We're looking for 2 more drivers, and we want to put all those routes back into place as soon as we can get those 2 drivers. We seem to get someone, and they seem to be a good person, and yet they can't pass their physical because when you drive buses, you're under federal regulations. So you have to have a drug test and have a physical so you can be a safe driver with others.
Okay, so I have one other question. I thought we were going to ask at the end, but I'll go back to the potholes that you were talking about. Since as I watch potholes get filled and roads be built, 100 yards, 200 yards of road here, where do we get our hot patch? Where do we get that from?
Oh, wow. That's a very good question, and I see a big deficiency. Asphalt, it's a chemical reaction. When you place it, there's several things that have to be in concert for it to last, for the road or the patch to last for a long time. First of all, you have to have good compacted base, which you do with gravel. The other part is you need to have asphalt that it's hot, 260 degrees to 320. If it gets colder than that and you put it on the ground, you're wasting your time. You might as well throw it out. That asphalt has to be hot. So we need to have the asphalt from a place that's close by if we have a large job. If we have a smaller job that takes about part of a load, or you use one load for 5, 6, 7 locations that are an hour or two away, we need to have a method of transporting them warm at that place. And you need a hot asphalt truck, which is a truck that has a box that's heated with propane heaters and keeps the asphalt at that temperature. So when you put it on the ground, it's warm enough. You also have to make sure that you compact it right as soon as you put it on the ground well enough. That way it gets compacted and you avoid air voids, because if you get air voids in asphalt, you're going to get cracks. And the Pavement Research Institute at UC Davis said that for each 1% of cracking, you get about 10% of, 1% of air voids, you then get 10% of cracks. So if you don't compact your asphalt well enough and you have air voids, you're going to have cracking. I asked, how long would it take? He says, well, how long thick is your asphalt? I said, oh, 2 inches, about 2 years. So it's about an inch per year for the cracking to develop if it's not well compacted. So I'm asking to see if we can get an asphalt truck like that to make sure that when we fix those asphalt patches, on chip seal roads, we have a machine that repairs them. But those roads are a few in the county. There are also other asphalt roads who use the same method. That pothole is going to start coming back. What people don't understand is once you start hitting potholes, you're going to have repairs on your vehicle. And we want to avoid that. And our roads are not safe. So the best way to do is have the right equipment and the right processes. Elsewhere, I've seen people how they repair asphalt roads. And of course, they've seen what others done in the past. However, the science is moving forward and it's telling us how we can improve that, just like everything else. And I was fortunate enough to work next to the University of Davis Pavement Center, and two of the directors are good friends of mine. And I found out that we have to make a few adjustments, but part of it is making sure we have the equipment to keep the asphalt warm. And for us, the plant it's in Reading, if we have to bring it here, it's an hour away. It's cold, it's useless. Might as well throw it out. We're wasting our money putting it in the ground. Sorry, I didn't want to get too far on it, but this is one of my.
Go ahead.
Do you ever use Eagle Rock for your?
Well, when you go out for asphalt, like every public works department, we have to go out to bid, and it's a lowest bidder. We're not allowed to go to the closest place.
Oh, okay.
So that's why.
So generally, the lowest bidder comes out of Reading.
Usually. However, if you put some criteria on the bid and it become more specific, we may be able to get asphalt from close by. In one of the projects that was in Western County, we're able to get asphalt from, I can't remember the plant, west of us, and our road people were saying, this is great. This asphalt works so well. We patched those roads and they seem to work much better. Why? Because the asphalt was hot. If you have a project that you have to put 5, 6, 10 loads of asphalt on it and you tarp your trucks, that's going to stay warm. But if you go to fix potholes in one location and then 5 shovelfuls someplace else or a quarter of a ton somewhere else, by the time you get there, that gets cold.
I think it would be good if we just move through the entire
Yes.
presentation and then we'll take the questions at
Okay.
the end. Thank you.
Let's see. How we get our money? We get the excise tax on the gasoline. We do not get any property tax money. And that gas tax money gets split very fairly. Well, according to a few people, because the legislature is the one that set the split. So Caltrans gets 64%, 36% goes to the cities and counties. And from that, 18% goes to counties. That's equal, fair share. And then that gets split once more. And this is what they call some people the equity, which means 25% goes on your maintained miles, 75 on the registered vehicles. So let's look at that. If it's $1 and it's going to be split 25% of the maintained miles and 75 on the registered vehicles, a county with 500, two counties with 500 miles each, and one having 100,000 registered vehicle and the other one 5,000, which one is going to get most of the money? The one with most registered vehicles. This presentation will be available in PDF if you like it. No need to taking any of those notes. I gave it to Ashley so she can give it to you afterwards. And let's look at some, where can we use those? Those funds that we get from gas taxes can only be used, be spent on roads that are part of the approved maintained miles. We cannot go in any roads that are not part of it. And this is a contrast between the highest and the lowest registered vehicles in the county. And of course, you know, LA County gets close to 200 million or so a year, and we'll get about 2.2 or 2.9 if we're lucky. So that's giving us the magnitude of funds spread to different places. Let's look at our revenues. HUTA, Highway Users Tax, the one that we just talked about, Secure Schools and Match Exchange, they're all funds that come through gas taxes. What can they be used for? As you can tell on the top through here, the top area is general salaries right through here, snowplow, utilities, parts, equipment, fill potholes, signs, replace culverts, clean ditches, and so forth. And that's for county maintained roads only. Then the next one is the RMRA formula. That's the SB1, the new gas tax that passed in 2017 because our roads were deteriorating so much, gave us some funds, maybe about a quarter of what we need, not all of what we need. And that also has restrictions. Not only has to be on county maintained roads, but it can only go for major repairs. We cannot use it to pay salaries. We cannot use it to mow ditches. We cannot use it to do striping. It's fix existing, as you can tell, the major repairs. So those are the money that we use to put new culverts in to replace the old ones, use matching funds. We use that to chip seal our roads and so forth. We also get other money through competitive, non-discretionary funds. Remember, I'm talking about the CIP. And again, we have to compete for those funds. And this year we have about 6.2 million, and those are for bridges, high friction surfers, guardrail, and similar projects. And those funds are only for federal aid roads, which we don't have that many. Not all of our roads are eligible for those federal funds. Those are competitive funds. And again, before I go and ask for those competitive funds, we have to fix the $25 million past disasters. If you remember the map with all those red bubbles throughout the county. And again, it's just a graphic representation. It doesn't show every location, but it shows the magnitude of what we have to do. The other funds, we get local transportation funds, LTF funds, and we have about 1.2 million, which 400 of that is to purchase new buses. And since our airports are not classified because we don't have enough airplanes registered there, at least 10, I believe, we get about a very generous amount, $10,000 per year from the state to maintain the airports. Our expenses are 3-4 times of that. Let's look what's happening with trends. When they first set the gas tax in 1994, they set at 18 cents a gallon. It goes by gallon, not by dollar. So it depends on how many gallons we sold. That's where we get the money, not on the price of the gas. The price can be $2 or $10. We still get 18 cents a gallon. The price is irrelevant. So here's a blue line shows the price index. This is about 2011. I used this presentation another time, and I thought it'd be good to use it here to show people what is happening to us. Our buying power is being reduced by 60% from 1994 to 2011. Now it's way more because remember, we get the same amount of money, so much per gallon. But there's another phenomenon happening. Everybody's worshiping those electric vehicles, except those who have to maintain roads. And as you can tell, on those two lines, the blue line on the top that goes through here, my mouse doesn't work. As you can tell it, this is the miles driven in California. People drive a lot more miles. The gallons of gas sold, it goes way down. Our revenue depends on the red. This is the gallons sold. Miles driven, the blue one, goes up, gallons sold. Why? Because in 1994, I had a vehicle that made 10 miles to a gallon. Right now, the one I have makes about 25. Other people have hybrids and they make 50. And those with electric, they don't buy gas. So they're free riders. So sure, it's good for the environment, maybe. We keep our funding on the same formula, we will not be able to maintain our roads because we're not going to have a revenue source. I'm open to questions.
Yes.
You had mentioned that, and I don't know if I heard you correctly, but that you have to have all of the damaged roads fixed before you can get funding from the feds. Is that what you said?
Well, I don't have capacity to fix, to get new money because if the old roads are not repaired, the damage is going to exacerbate. In other words, we have a little area that's small and we can go in one lane road. If we don't fix it on time, then there will be no road in the next storm.
Right. So, but is fixing those roads, I'm trying to understand, do those roads have to be fixed in order for you to be eligible to get more money? Or is it just you need to fix those roads first?
We need to fix those roads first.
Okay, all right.
Because
I
if we
just was
do
wondering
not,
if there was a
we have
contingency.
FEMA funding and it's only good for so many years. We
Okay.
had to ask for extensions. We had to ask for extension for several projects. Why? We do not have the staff in place. Just 2 engineers more would help. I'm going to go out to get a project manager to manage all the disaster projects. I think my predecessor was talking to 2 retired annuitants about coming to help the county with the FEMA projects, with disaster projects. And their question was, are those FEMA projects? And said, yes, we're not interested because of the headaches. I used to have hair before I started dealing with FEMA and the environmental agencies. So that's what happens to you. And again, if we don't fix our existing damage first, it's going to be worse and we will not have any roads. Like I said earlier, we have soils that they're not that cohesive. They can't take too much weight. And again, I'm waiting for more stored damage from the last storm because as time goes by, the weight goes by, increases and that will slide off.
Chair, I have one when you're ready.
Just a moment. Supervisor Goku, do you have questions? Do you have questions?
I do have a question. Can you go back to the airport slide? You had a couple, maybe 3 back, I think it might have been. 5 there. Keep on, it's not on the page there yet. Keep going.
Is it the one listing them or the amount of money?
It's the one with the amount of money with the airports at the bottom. I think it said 50,000. You said we spend 4x that.
It was 10,000 each airport.
Yeah,
10,000
each,
10,000
50.
each airport.
And so you said that it costs $200,000. Is that what I heard right?
No, I said we spent 2 or 3 times another couple hundred. The other part is we don't have any airport layout plans. We need to have overlays on some of those airports. The airport layout plan could be as close as 500,000. We went to bid out for an airport to overlay it. We had 560 or close to 600,000. The bids came way higher than that. So we're not able to do it. That was a few years ago. Prices go up. We're not getting enough money to fix the airports. And that's the sad part.
I wanted to, if this is the right time, go back to the pothole situation. And having business that has a road in front of it that gets potholes. The pothole's this big. Next year it's that big, and 5 years from now.
They grow just like kids.
Yeah, no doubt. So, right now, if I wanted to fix potholes in Trinity Center and, Xenia, you couldn't do it in the same day.
No,
So if we did want to do that, we would have to call out a truck from Reading, go to Trinity Center, maybe one to go to Burnt Ranch, one at a time, correct? Am I getting that right?
if you call one from Reading to go to Trinity Center, it's not going to work unless it's a truck that keeps the asphalt hot, unless it's a hot asphalt truck. If it's a regular transfer truck with a tarp on it, maybe you can go away about an hour, hour and a half with it. If you go any longer, and if it's cooler, the other part is, I did not go into technical details. I didn't want to bore you, but the temperature on the ground has to be at least 50 degrees and rising. If it's colder, the asphalt is not going to have a good reaction. Remember, it's a chemical reaction that takes place. It needs to be warm, it needs to be compacted certain ways to get the air voids out. If you don't get the air voids out, sure, it looks good the first year, and the next year, you have cracks. And you wonder why. Well, you didn't compact it, or it was too cold.
So with the cost of doing that, bringing it out of Reading to do some of our potholes, if you've thought about it or figured it out, how long would it take to recoup our cost if we had one of those trucks and we could do our own and not have to sublease, as we'll say, out of Reading?
Well,
compared to
first,
the cost spent.
first of all, you can't rent any of those trucks because
No.
they're not available. If we own one, we'll be able to fix our potholes a lot better. They'll stay intact for several years rather than 2-3 months when we use the cold mix or any other methods. Now, this is for regular asphalt roads and chip seal roads. We use different method. We can do that. It's cold oil to begin with. We use cold oil. But for regular roads, that asphalt truck is going to be very, very helpful, keeping the asphalt warm. It doesn't matter where we get it because it can keep it warm for 4 or 5 hours, as long as you have propane to keep it warm.
So at some point, there would be a break-even cost on purchasing that truck over time.
I think without it, we can't fix any potholes correctly.
Fair enough. How long do those trucks last?
How much you use it could last 20 years, 30 years. We can use it 2-3 months out in the summertime, depending on the usage of it.
That's all I had so far.
Weather.
Thank you. Yes, I was just wondering, following up on what Supervisor Carpenter Harris noted, is we're going to hear about the regional transportation plan later today,
Yes.
which is based on the kind of funding that you were explaining to us and how we would use it based on the prioritization of our whole process that I was happy to participate in. It was interesting. But when we have these kinds of backlogs and now new 15, I think it was, projects at 20 million plus, how does that then affect the plan that we're about to put forward? Do we say, well, that was our plan and now we're taking the money over here?
It's different money, different pots.
Okay.
Okay, what is going to be the same would be the local matching fund. If it's any capital projects for federal eligible roads, and we have to do overlay or any type of work on it, they require us to have about 12% local match. Some of our disaster, depending on what type of disaster, if the disaster was declared by FEMA, then we'll get 75% from FEMA. And from the remaining 25, we'll get 75 from Cal OES, and it'll be approximately 6.5 to 7% local match for the disasters. If the disaster was not federally eligible, like Canyon Creek, we're going to get 75% from Cal OES, and the rest of it's a local match. So those are the money that we have available for local matches. So what is in the RTP on the transportation plan is going to be for competitive projects typically, or projects that we have to do with gas money. So if we have disasters to repair, they take priorities. So yes, we're going to do a lot less of the others.
Okay. And do you have is there at all public process for that determination, or is that just the department looks at the priorities and says we're shifting these funds out of the RTP and over to these disaster related functions and make those decisions and move.
We do not shift funds from the RDP because a lot of the funds that are coming through Caltrans, they're for competitive or formula funds for projects. For example, for guardrails, for bridge replacements. We can't take those money away. They're very specific. Let's say we have to
I'm sorry,
replace.
I heard you say we would end up doing less.
Oh, you end up doing less because we don't have the capacity.
Oh, okay, not funding, but.
No, if I had 10 more engineers, sure, we'll be able to work on all the FEMA projects and we'll work on the other projects. The sad part is that California usually gets about $2.5 billion a year for road funds. This year, it's close to 3 times that. So that means it's going due to the infrastructure bill that passed by the feds. That means there's a lot of money that we could have that we can't have because we do not have the capacity. And again, if we don't fix the existing disasters that they have FEMA funds that are up to expire, then we're shooting ourselves not in one foot, but both feet.
Thank you.
Supervisor Frazier, you have a question?
I don't know if I actually have a question, more of a statement. And my thought would be, this was an incredible presentation, but we have to remember we're still in Trinity County and we can't let the perfect be the detriment of the good. And so it's like, we have to do what we can with what we have instead of, okay, we have to have this perfect road base and all this. We can't do that. So that would be my thing is let's do what we can with what we have and make it work for the people that need the roads. And we'll work toward the perfect when we have the people and the funding and we can do it.
Absolutely correct. And we're not trying to do the perfect. On the depiction of the 2 different types of roads was to show you what to expect. It was mostly for expectations. You can't expect county roads to perform the same way as a state highway. And part of our areas, we have to put them in place for people to go through. I agree with you 100%. And as we go through all those disaster repairs, even if we wanted to put them in the perfect shape, we can't because of what the conditions are there and what is usage for. But you have to be aware of the large trucks, additional traffic, and what are our funding sources and how small they are.
Thank you for such a detailed presentation, for your effort to put that together, and for staff, I'm sure, that assisted in that. Thank you. It's really helpful for us to understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have other department heads in the room that would like to report out this morning? Sheriff Saxon?
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Next time I plan on doing this, I'm going to have Panos prepare my presentation because there's no way I can compete. However, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. First, I'd just like to report out on the fact that at the last board meeting, you signed an amendment or approved the amendment rather for Frontier Communications to allow us to install the hard lines to the new dispatch center to improve our communications with the downriver cell towers or towers downriver and also up to the north end of the county. We got the signed contracts. We forwarded that to Frontier Communications, and we at this time, as of last night, and let me check real fast. Right now, are still waiting for information from Frontier that they are ready to move ahead with that. We've been in contact with them almost daily, waiting for them to do that. We have Day Wireless at the new dispatch center, waiting to connect it. We are in contact with Six Rivers Communication, who are contracted with the Oregon Mountain Repeater. They are ready to make the connection. So we're just waiting for Frontier Communications to do their part to run that line. So that's the update on that. But they do have the signed contract, so we're just waiting for them. The other thing I just wanted to give you a little snapshot of our 2022 calls for service and whatnot that we received at the sheriff's office. And again, Panos, next year you're going to do my visual aids so that it's a lot prettier. Anyway, our dispatch during our calls for service, we received 6,716 calls for service last year. Of that, child and juvenile calls was 214. Our animal control calls, as I mentioned earlier, last year we almost hit the 600 mark. We had 592 calls for service. Code enforcement calls for service was 269. Narcotics calls was 59. Patrol calls, 3,707 calls for service. And just to kind of break down a few of those, 655 were suspicious circumstances. 541 were safe checks or welfare checks. 205 were trespassing, 134 vandalism. 124 of those were domestic violence. 125 were warrant arrests. 110 were burglary calls. 151 were threats or harassment. And 269 were public peace, verbal, physical, or noise. So that was, again, 3,707 calls. We were dispatched fire service and fire, medical, and search and rescue, 1,846 calls for service. Our boating unit and vehicles calls for service, 179 calls. So we issued 179 citations, made 339 arrests, and there were 89 coroner cases that we handled. Incident reports that we took, 1,701, and kind of a breakdown, a little bit of those. The most highest numbers were animal control incidents, 104, burglary, 85, child juvenile cases, 87, code enforcement, 199, death investigations were 81. That's a little bit different from the actual coroner cases because investigations deal with those that are more suspicious in nature, where we actually have to investigate them. Domestic violence was 61, violations of court orders, 63, narcotics, both felony and misdemeanor, 58, grand theft, 84, and stolen property, 73, and vandalism, 84, and warrant arrests, we made 124 of those. So that's just kind of a snapshot of Sheriff's Office and our activities and calls for service for last year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Gogan, you have a question?
Can we get a copy of that when you get a chance, Tim?
Yeah, I can break that down for you and I can send those to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of other board members?
Anyone?
Supervisor Lubach?
Sheriff, I know we've spoken about this and just wanted to check with you. Don't want to get in your way. Also happy to help reach out to Frontier if you think that would be helpful in just communicating the sense of urgency that we have about this. But again, happy to also leave it in your hands. I'm just offering.
Thank you, Supervisor. I will do that. If I don't get any information back from them today, I'll be happy to reach out to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Fisher, good. Okay. Thank you for not only that report and that update, but thank you to yourself and to all of your officers for your service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll pass it on.
Thank you. All right. I don't see other department heads in the room. Ashley, do we have any on Zoom? I don't think she's here.
I have no raised hands, no chats.
Dan, were you here for a board report? No. Okay. All right, moving on, a report from our county administrative officer,
Good morning.
CAO Hamilton.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, members of the board. First, I would just like to thank staff and yourselves for just the onboarding in the last week and a half. I think I've been able to meet with each of you on separate occasions and just assessing the priorities, during this time. So thank you for that. And the only thing that you'll note today is that the fee schedule is not on today's agenda. We'll bring it back later this month for your review. We had 2 departments with an adjustment, so we're working with staff on those items.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, report from members of the Board of Supervisors, and we'll start with Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
I need to report that I had a very positive and I feel good meeting with both OES and DOT regarding the Canyon Creek slide, and we are moving forward with the meeting that we requested for the public. It will be this Thursday at the Junction City School. So I was happy that that we were able to complete that, and we'll head into that meeting with hopes to really just engage with the public on that. And then also, during that meeting, we also had a discussion regarding the Garrett Road situation down in High Palm. And I would like to ask that we agendize a conversation on the Garrett Road situation to try to work with our county roads department to figure out how we can start trying to figure out how to fix what seems like it's a little bit of a misunderstanding for whether or not that road is ours or not, and with the public.
Yes, I hear your concern, and absolutely we will address that. And I think that the best way to do so is to give direction to our CAO to have whatever meetings, conversations need to be had offline first. And then when we come to a point that you feel it needs to be agendized for board action or decision, then we'll bring it before the board. Okay. Thank you. All right, Supervisor Gogan.
I had a meeting on January 26th with PATH, which is a partnership in action for Trinity Health. And it's an anti-tobacco vaping for the youth in Trinity County. I was attended by a lot of people at the Veterans Hall. In fact, a lot of people in the room were there. It's a great deal, well attended, great presenters. I think we're heading down a pretty good road with the vaping thing, especially since California just cut back on any flavored tobacco. So the thousands of flavored vapes that were out there are now not on the market in California anymore. So that has to be helpful to our youth. So I'm happy to participate in PATH. I think it's a very good project with some great people leading it. So I just wanted to thank them for putting on a great presentation on the 26th, I think it was. Besides that, I had no outside county travel. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. We'll go to the other end, Supervisor Frazier.
Right. Couple outside county meetings this past few weeks. On January 19th, I was in Eureka for North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District. Couple of things from that meeting. The Air Quality Hearing Board has multiple vacancies still at this point, and people from Trinity County are eligible for that. There's they need an alternate in the professional engineer department and 2 medical professionals that can be seated on that board. Also from that meeting, the EPA is proposing to revise annual PM 2.5 particulate matter, little ones, air quality standards from 12 micrograms per cubic meter to 9 or to 10 micrograms per cubic meter, which would push a lot of California counties into a non-attainment. We wouldn't be there at this point, but it would. The concern with North Coast Unified is if that is done, it really makes it difficult to do any prescribed burning. So that's something to keep an eye on moving forward. The other meeting I had was Colusa Glen Trinity Community Action Partnership on January 25th in Reading. That has 2 primaries instead of a primary and an alternate. So Supervisor Gogan is actually a voting member of, and he's welcome to be at all those meetings. Also at that meeting, I was elected the secretary, which I don't know what that entails, but hopefully not much because I'm not much of a secretary. And the next meeting for CGT CAP will be in Orland. So
And with that committee, it may be wise for us then, knowing that he's actually a second primary. Council, do we need to formally make him a second primary?
That would be good to just have it formalized, but
Okay, and we can do that.
the chair can do that also just on discretion, but since we're here, might as well do it.
Okay, so I can just do it.
wave the wand.
You are now a second primary.
You're not waving the wand that I'm now primary secretary though, correct?
That
That would be terrible.
If we would have had that information previously, I would have nominated you.
And do we need an alternate for times when one or the other cannot attend? Since we're voting members, we want to be at the table.
I don't think it's really that necessary personally, but that I think would be up to you.
Yeah, I have not reviewed the bylaws to know if they are requiring us to bring an alternate, so
Yeah.
it would be the chair's discretion.
Are both of you going to make every meeting so we don't lose a vote?
As long as my secretary's there.
All right, we'll leave it to that. If you find in the future that either of you are having a difficult time making a meeting, then we'll be sure to have a backup for you. You can just let us know. All right, Supervisor Lutweiler.
Thank you. Most of the committees that I am a part of have not been meeting recently, so I haven't been to those, but I have been in contact. There is one committee that I found, when I checked with staff, they said the last active meeting they knew of was almost 20 years ago. So we may need to adjust that on our roster, but I'll get back to you with more information. A lot of my activities have been more on board liaison type roles. Is that something to update now, or do you want me to do that later? So on the strategic plan, we've talked about that before, but I have been having weekly meetings with
Oh,
staff.
I apologize. We do have a strategic plan in a separate spot.
Okay,
Mhm.
and cannabis as well?
Yes,
Okay,
as well.
nothing else.
Okay. For myself, I have several things to share. First of all, I just want to say that I do appreciate the continued conversations that have taken place since our last meeting in efforts to find workable solutions to the needs that have been expressed by the North County Volunteer Fire Departments. People are very concerned that those needs get addressed and answered, and I appreciate those conversations that have been taking place. I was on a meeting on February 2nd with the planning department staff on a broadband update, statewide broadband update. And we will have a follow-up broadband discussion with our immediate representative. So Barbara Hayes is the RCRC individual who works directly with Golden State Connect Authority. She and Connie Stewart, who is our consortia lead for this area, our local planning staff, our interim CAO, and Travis Finch from Velocity and myself. We will meet on the 14th, just so that you know that we're staying up to date and on task with what's going on with broadband development. I had an onboarding session with RCRC on Friday. They do a wonderful job with their onboarding. And I have been offered a mentor, which I'm thrilled. It is Supervisor Adams from Sierra County, and that's a perfect match because Sierra County has, I would say, equal concerns with the issues that they face, their land mass, their population, the percentage of federal lands that they deal with. So that will be a good affiliate. You've heard about the SURF funding. Supervisor Lutweiler has been talking about with regard to economic development. And Golden State Finance Authority, which is another affiliate entity of RCRC, is applying for some of those dollars on our behalf, on behalf of all of the rural counties. They are requesting funds for a program of work that will provide all of the member counties with access to technical assistance and expertise, grant writing capacity, and financial bridging to initiate grant awarded projects for public infrastructure and community facilities investments. So I submitted a letter of support just from myself, but as the RCRC delegate on behalf of our county, in an effort that RCRC would be selected for that funding, in which case we could take advantage of those grant writing opportunities. Alec Domka is the Economic and Community Development Advisor for UC Cooperative Extension. We haven't had an individual in that spot for Trinity County for some time. He represents Humboldt, Del Norte, and Trinity. So Supervisor Lutweiler and I spent 40 minutes with him on the phone this past week, understanding services to which we have access that we didn't know about. So we have invited Mr. Domka to give a presentation to the board. He'll be here on March 21st. And it's not just the Board of Supervisors that can take advantage of these opportunities. All of our local entities, nonprofits, even individuals have the opportunity to utilize those services. So really good to understand what's on the menu. You can take part. On our January 18th meeting, I had told you that I had met a gentleman named Thad Bettner. He's the general manager of the Glen Calusa Irrigation District, and he is the site's reservoir project chair. I had met him at the Economic Forecasting Conference and asked that he would connect with us and come and give a presentation on the site's project. Since I gave him my contact information and was not able to get his, I didn't want to sit around and hope he was going to reach out. So I found Jerry Brown, who is the executive director of the project. And those two gentlemen are very much, of course, in touch with each other. They both may be here. I'm not sure, but Jerry Brown for sure will be here on our upcoming meeting on February 22nd to help us to understand. And so just so that you kind of know, if sites project doesn't mean anything to you, this is a proposed 1.5 million acre foot reservoir, and it is intended to capture storm water flows from the Sacramento River for storage and release in dry years for environmental, residential, and agricultural uses. And it is, you can go online and look it up. It's a large discussion with some very interesting advantages and an awful lot of work being put into that. Quick update on the Minersville boat ramp. The Forest Service needed a letter from the Division of Boating and Waterways confirming very specifically the updated allocated funds that would be contributed toward the project, just so that the planning phase could move forward. And we were just having a lot of trouble getting that. Not that I'm sure that they had lost interest or cared. They had allocated updated dollars when the project was delayed twice in the past. So I don't think that there was any intent not to do so, but we didn't seem to be able to get their attention. So what I think is wonderful is I reached out to both Assemblymember Woods' office himself personally and to his staff, and also to Senator McGuire's staff. And I'm not sure what exactly each of them did, but whatever they did, it was successful. And the Forest Service received that needed letter, and the planning is moving forward. So that is really good news. I am going to form an ad hoc committee for water management issues to Trinity County. This will terminate at the end of my chairmanship, and I am going to assign our Trinity Management Committee members, Supervisors Gogan and Carpenter Harris, to this ad hoc with your agreement. Perfect, thank you. All right. That's the end of reports from the board generally. We'll move into reports from ad hocs. So the Good Neighbor Authority happens to be mine. I'm very excited to talk about this because in 2 years of enjoying this job, I've never had, well, this is on the top 10, I think, how much fun I've had in a room. Watching our forest supervisor, our Tara's assignment. Thank you. Thanks. Our district ranger, and we had our fuels manager, Kelly McElroy, in the room. David Kolbeck, who is assigned from DOT to handle the Good Neighbor Authority. And then supporting him was Director Caucus. Watching those four highly educated professionals figure out how we can look at where the lines are, what's provided, what are the opportunities, and how can we creatively stay inside the lines to get as many needs met as possible. It was an absolute thrill, a total delight. My hats off to all 4 of them, and I'm really excited about this. So where it landed, just to give you a quick overview, the project started with conversation. Tara drafted what a document might look like. It was passed to DOT for David to get really creative with how far can we drive this, take it back into the room that we had this week. They revised in such a way, the goal is that when this goes into Forest Service contracts and agreements, it comes out of the hopper and doesn't have to have more revisions and go back in, because then there will be delays. So it's been routed back to internal review. From there, I think, David, you get one more look at it, and then it will be routed to contracts and agreements. So this is really exciting. Trinity County's never had this. And the opportunities that this will open up to us, I think, are going to be very exciting to watch in days and months to come. So I just really thank David and Director Caucus for their efforts, and very exciting. All right, on to the strategic plan update. Supervisor Woodward.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so the staff members, leaders who've volunteered to work on this project have been meeting with me weekly as we are taking what the board approved last September and basically fleshing that out to have the action plans that would make the deliverables that the board approved actually happen. And that includes identifying what specific steps would take place, when they would start, when they would finish, how we would measure success, who owns it. And I think the only takeaways I'll share at this point is just by doing that process, we've already identified a number of things for which there would have to be additional funding awarded or priorities shifted for them to actually happen. So it's one thing for the board to have said, yes, we approved this plan and these things should be delivered this year. But this is the step where we also see, well, this is actually what it would take. So then that would be back to us to say, okay, then here's the change in priorities or the funding or whatever. And then we also found some things that perhaps don't even belong in the plan, but that will come back to the board for your review. So the process is moving forward. It's not an easy or simple one because you have to really work through the details, but my hat's off to the leaders who are stepping up and doing this work on behalf of the county.
Nice. And thank you for your guidance. All right, now we have, this is unusual, we haven't had this before, it's a staff committee report. So a staff committee, just to remind, is a little bit upside down picture of an ad hoc. It works roughly the same. It's just that the onus rests with staff, and then assigned supervisor or supervisors, 1 or 2 of them, are responsible to be responsive as needs arise, versus an ad hoc where the weight rests with the 1 or 2 supervisors that have been assigned, and staff have been identified and asked to be responsive. So this is the picture where it's the staff committee, and we have our Cannabis Division Director Plavani, and he will give the update.
All right, good morning, Chair, Supervisors. This will be my first Zoom presentation, so bear with me. I was not aware until this morning that we were going to have a formal presentation for you. So while we were all enjoying Director Kokas's excellent PowerPoint presentation, I put together a quick one to kind of run through what we've been working on. I don't know, let's see if I can. All right. So this is a preliminary report based on what we've been doing over the last several weeks. The development of this has definitely been supported by Supervisor Lutweiler, and we appreciate them. And so I'm just going to run through kind of the framework that he presented to us and just sort of a brief overview of these elements. So the objectives of the Cannabis Division Budget Staff Committee essentially are to produce a document for the Board of Supervisors for your review that shows the key assumptions that were documented, estimated compliance-related fines and fees that will be collected into the general fund, estimated cannabis tax revenues that will be collected into the general fund, the net financial impact, and a financial forecast, essentially a spreadsheet based on these assumptions. So in terms of the assumptions that we're looking to document and incorporate into the financial projections, just a quick run through of the highlights.
I'm sorry, Drew. We can't see your presentation.
Oh,
You have to share the screen.
okay. I don't know if you have to enable that for me somehow.
I have you spotlighted. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a green button that says share screen
Okay,
on your Zoom.
figure out how to close this screen. Sorry, you guys.
If you want, you can email it to me and then I can put it on the screen here.
Sure, I just can't figure out how to get the Zoom presentation off the screen sharing screen.
Hmm.
Give me one sec.
I think what we'll do is, Drew, if it's okay with you, I'm going to move on. We've got a couple other report outs, and let's let you just kind of reset there, and we'll circle back.
Actually, Ed came over and helped me figure it out. So I apologize.
No worries.
All right, so tell me now if this works if I start the slide this way. Can you now see my screen sharing?
No.
Okay, so let me flip flop. All right, come back to me and I'll figure it out. I apologize.
No worries. You're perfectly fine. All right. I'm going to circle back to Supervisor Gogan. He had an item on his report out. He forgot.
So I apologize. After our discussion about the fire departments, volunteer fire departments last meeting, I decided to meet with both of my fire departments, Hayfork and Douglas City. I started with Douglas City just to get an update on what they're doing there. As of last week, we have 12 plus members on the roster at the Douglas City Volunteer Fire Department, which is a high for the last probably 10 years. They're really doing well. The projects they've done of late are they replaced the engine bay door. They got a brand new backup generator installed, which was purchased from Ace Hardware for a great price with funding from Reading Rancheria, which covered installation costs and majority of the generator, and department members dug trenches for contractors to install wiring, etc. They have new water storage tanks to be installed at Poker Bar Station with funding from Humboldt Area Foundation. They have new SCBAs through FEMA grant written by Junction City Fire Department with our portion of percentage cost provided by the Douglas City Fire Bells. They purchased and replaced a duty rig, brand new, almost a brand new truck that they got, which they really needed. It's reliable and it's nice and we need it. And they got future projects will be painting the firehouse and looking into restoring the water tower, the historic water tower that's right next to our volunteer fire department, Douglas City, and having a store right across the street from the fire department. It's amazing amount of work that those folks do. You know, they're first responders. They just do everything. And I just can't, thank them enough for what they do in our community. They really do a great job. And it's good to see that we do have somewhat of a younger, group of people coming in. We have a lot of people in their 20s, early 30s that are working with our Douglas City Volunteer Fire Department. So we're not tapping out age-wise. We're actually recruiting some younger folks. And Marty, the chief there, is doing a great job with that. They're very, very happy to work there at Douglas City Fire Department. So I'm thrilled about that. And I'll be heading over to Hayfork and talking to them. And let's hope we have the same good news from them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Director Polbani, we see your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you all. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
You're
Hopefully
fine.
this will work. Okay, so this is a preliminary report. I wasn't aware, obviously, as I said, that this was going to happen today. So again, apologies for the technical difficulties, and we will run through it. Okay, so the objectives of the Cannabis Division Budget Staff Committee are essentially to produce a document for the Board of Supervisors that shows the documented key assumptions that will be included and are the basis of the spreadsheet itself, estimated compliance-related fines that will be collected into the general fund, estimated cannabis tax revenues, the net financial impact, and the total financial forecast based on all of the assumptions and data compiled. So a quick run through of some of the key assumptions that we will document, that we have documented. Total number of active licenses projected forward, the total combined tax revenues between cultivation and storefront retail that we will see into the future, grant revenues, and then annual division staff costs, the costs related to processing applications, CEQA documents, and issuing licenses, and then the fixed and variable costs that are part of our currently budgeted budget. The estimated compliance-related fines that will be collected based on the information I've received between 2018 and present, there's been a total fines of $6.5 million roughly, and roughly half of that has been collected. Cannabis tax revenues, with 530 active licenses, based on my preliminary calculations, I believe that would exceed $3 million per year. I am still waiting to receive the historical information from the tax collector's office so that we can have that to reference. The net financial impact essentially is comprised of cultivation tax revenue, the storefront retail tax revenue, property tax valuation increases, and then the broad economic benefit that this industry provides to local communities and the local businesses that support. And then the financial forecast, which is in progress. You can see here, this is the spreadsheet that we're working on. This is essentially the spreadsheet that was provided to us by Supervisor Leutweiler and that I've augmented a bit. That's just a snippet so that you can see what we're working on. And that is a quick report to our staff committee. I'm happy to answer any questions or further discussion if you would like.
Okay, Director Plawani, thank you. Well done, and appreciate the clarity that even just this overview has provided. Questions of board members? Okay. I'm going to move on to the closed session report. On January 18th, we had there was a conference with real property negotiators, and there was a liability claim that were both discussed. In both cases, direction was given to staff. And then in our January 26th meeting, we had a closed session item regarding a public employee evaluation, county administrative officer. In that discussion, direction was given to staff regarding a wording amendment that needs to be made to our post annuitant contracts for purposes of clarity with CalPERS. So those are the results of those closed session conversations. With that, we are going to take a 10-minute break, and we will adjourn until 10:40.
I wish that's what it was. Take a pill, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
and considered separately. Is there any public comment in the room on the consent calendar? Seeing none, any public comment on Zoom?
I have no raised hands, no chat.
All right, with that, we'll close public comment and bring it to the board. Are there any items any supervisors wish to pull? All right, seeing none, entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt the consent calendar as presented.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion from Supervisor Frazier and a second from Supervisor Gogan. Ashley?
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutwiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right. Public hearings, Trinity County Transportation Commission, item 3.1. Hold a public hearing to consider public comments regarding the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and associated negative declaration. And item 2, adopt a resolution which adopts the 2022 Regional Transportation Plan and associated negative declaration. No fiscal impacts. Director Caucus.
Good morning again, Panos Kokas, Director of Transportation. This is going to be the adoption of the Regional Transportation Plan. This is a plan that has to be updated at least every 5 years. And all projects that we have to do in the next 5 years have to be part of the RTP. Otherwise, we'll not be able to get federal funds or state funds. We have held several public meetings throughout the county. Green Dot has been our consultant. They have done a great job with all those hearings. They put the plan together. I think you've seen a draft of it back in November of last year. We went through and finalized it, and this is the time for you to adopt the negative declaration and the RTP itself. So I'll let Mr. Schwein from Green Dot give you the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kokas. Greetings, Jeff Schwein. I think I'm familiar with all of you. We are ending the development of the Regional Transportation Plan. I know it says 2022 and it's now 2023, but really the project's pretty much completed. So today is the final adoption. So I'll just get into the presentation. Next slide. Yeah, so I've got about 6 slides here, tell you a little bit about where we're at with this, and then show you the guidance on how to adopt it at the end. But the Regional Transportation Plan is updated every 5 years, like Director Kokas says, and it includes all of the modes of mobility throughout the county. There's 3 main elements that are required for this: the policy element, the action element, which has the projects, and the financial element. Next slide. We did a very robust public planning process. I would say out of 100% of this, I'd say, almost 40 to 50% of it was reaching out to the communities throughout Trinity County and talking to the people about their mobility needs and the condition of their transportation network. So we developed the existing conditions, had a lot of community input, developed the documents, did analysis, and then developed the final report. And that's where we are today. It's taken about a year for the whole process. So 15 community meetings, and this didn't include just one-on-one sort of stakeholder meetings and talking to folks around the county. And we got a lot of feedback and comments, and it was actually really fun for me and my team. Sophia has put a lot of miles driving around the county. And so, yeah, super fun getting to know the little nooks and crannies of Trinity County and extracting information from the constituents and the residents here. Next slide. Policy element. Really, this is just, it needs to be consistent with other planning documents like your general plan, although that's really old, so we couldn't quite align those policies, but this one will take precedence because it's the newer and it complies with state laws. Next slide. The action element. So there's over 200 projects in here. like Pano said, we have to have projects in here in order to get funding to develop those projects. And this is a 20-year planning document. So it is a long-range plan, but the short-term project lists are ones that we really know the funding will be there for, and they will get developed. So next slide. The financial element. This is an important slide because an important part of the regional transportation plan, because it does look at all of the funding sources for transportation. There is over, let's see, $4.2 million just in the short range. $425 million long range, 125 million in the mid range, and 131 million in the short range. And that is for the costs of the projects that we have on the books. What we do is we align the project costs with the revenues, do a subtraction. We have to constrain the short range to have it be 0 or a positive number. And then the long range projects will filter in to the short range further down the road when we update the RTP in the next 5 years. So there's $672 million in proposed projects in here. And that's a lot of money. Luckily, there's a lot of money out there. And the more that Trinity County can deliver their projects, the more money we can get to deliver more. So it is one of those, it's really nice to see Panos's presentation at the beginning of the meeting here, because it really does hammer home the fact that we are constrained by resources and not necessarily funding resources, although those are very sort of siloed. But, you have a professional team here that knows how to work with them, which is great. But if we had more people and time resources, if we could just work all day, every day, then we could do more. But anyways, I just looking, I think this is positioning the county very well to go get more funding to improve transportation facilities in the county. $270 million shortfall, and that is for specific things like pavement, for pretty much being the biggest one. We'll hit that next slide. Thanks, Ashley. Here is the projected needs, and this does not include disaster damage. You can see in the bottom right pie chart, the roadway local unmet needs for costs is $234 million. So if we were to bring all the roads up to the right pavement condition, $230 million. And you can see the other needs there. One of the reasons the bridge funding is so high, or the bridge needs is so high, is because all of your bridges are quite old and there's limited funding, and it takes a long time to get a bridge from getting the funding in place, programming the funding, to hiring a designer, to a contractor, to building the bridge. It's like 5 to 10 years for that whole process. So there really has to be a lot of planning in place to do that. So project needs, there's the cost right there. Next slide. So I think this is going to be wrapping up. So, the environmental document. So this is a programmatic document. It looks at it's CEQA defines a plan as a project. It's not a specific project. We're not doing individual analysis of all the projects in here. That happens at the next phase when the project actually starts being developed. But we do need to evaluate this. Does this have an impact on the environment under CEQA's eyes? And so it's a programmatic document. We're really confident with the work that we've done to develop this into a categorical exemption and negative declaration. And so that's the environmental document that's associated with the regional transportation plan. Next slide. So The actions, you guys are probably better at this than I am, but we need to hold a public hearing. So open a public hearing, take public comment, close it, and then I think the resolution has the adoption of the regional transportation plan along with the environmental documentation, negative declaration, and then we're done. And I'm here to take questions, and thanks a lot.
Thank you. Questions of board members?
Yeah, I have a question. Could you go back to the pie chart you had there, a 5-year and then 20-year spread? It's 5 years short term. So my simple mind says 5 years cost, let's just say there we go. We'll say, make it easy on me. Bridge, 23.5 million. Then you get to 20-year total project cost, that same, oh no, it's broken down one, sorry.
Yeah, it's down at the bottom. Bridge,
Gotcha.
110 million.
Yes, so
Mhm.
everything right there is just 4x over the 5-year to the 20-year, basically.
Well, not necessarily, because in the short term, we've done more work to develop cost estimates for some of the projects. In the longer term, like when we're talking about, years 11 through 20, we don't have the detailed cost estimates for those projects. We know the bridge needs to be replaced. We know the road needs to be reconstructed, but we haven't gone through the design work or even the preliminary design to get to those cost estimates. So the project costs looking out at I'd say the last like 9 to 11 years are a little bit softer. We can get pretty accurate with the more near-term ones.
So with a robust first 5 years, would that offset, we'll say year 11 or 5 through 20, the projected cost increase of goods and wages and all that? If we were better going into year 11 or 7 than we are now, would that help the total cost over the span of 20 years?
Yeah, it definitely would. Yeah, and I think the closer you get to developing those, in 2.5 years, in 4 years, you're sharpening your pencil for those projects that are 6, 7, 8 years, and then those are flowing in. So yeah, the better and more effective we are at delivering projects in the near term, we're positioning ourselves better for mid and long term too.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for all the work that you've done. I know we got to spend some time together at a number of these meetings, and I thought it was really well done that you guys gathered the input, really made the process clear. One of my first questions is, how do we guide the public in now understanding the outcomes? They were saying, here is something I really want to be done, and here's something that's really important to me. And now there's this big document, and some are in 5 years and some are in 11, and how can we guide them that here's why you can find out how your input landed and where your projects are?
Yeah, so part of the report has something called a performance measures chapter. And in the performance measures chapter, it's broken down into the different types of projects, say transit projects, roadway projects, bridges. And the guidance in the report is to have monitoring programs in place. So yes, you said you were going to purchase a new transit bus in 2026. And then, so on a regular basis, annual basis, the transit staff is looking at, are we still on target to do that? Are we saving up the money in order to do that? And then did we actually buy the vehicle? So realistically, I don't think there's like a public portal to go to look at the performance of the county on how it's doing. I think the next look from my perspective, from the broad county perspective, would be to at the next regional transportation plan update, which would be in 5 years from now.
So maybe a more specific question is if I am in District 1 and want to know where a project that I voice interest in, and I know the answer to this, I'm trying to help get the guidance from you about how the public should best access this information. Where do I go to see where did that project land? Is
Sure.
it in the 5-year plan? Is it in the 10-year plan? Is it in the 20-year plan?
Oh, well, yeah, the constituents, the citizens,
Mhm.
anybody who wants to get that information could go into the plan and find out where their project landed in there. If they want to follow up on it, they would need to contact probably the Transportation Commission staff or the DOT staff to see like when that project's actually going to construction.
And will that still be on the website that you set up for this process, or will that be brought back into the Department of Transportation site?
It'll be on both sites.
So linked.
And I don't know how long we'll leave the project site up for.
Okay.
It's pretty cheap to do, so probably just leave it up. And then one thing that I've been talking to Public Works about is developing a map that's like a web-based map of all the projects that we have in the regional transportation plan. And if that gets going, I'm sure you'll hear about it. And then that would be a good place for
Great.
folks to go. Caltrans has a really good example of this in District 1. I'm not sure about District 2's map, but it's just basically like an ArcGIS platform that's online. You can access it and you can see all the different projects, where they are, and click on them and get information about them. So
That's great. Back to what Director Cocos presented, that we have, and you mentioned this resource limitation. So when you look at what we put in the 5-year plan, that is pretty well funded because you say the money's there. Does the assessment indicate that we can actually accomplish that with, even if all of our allocated positions were filled, do we have the resources to actually carry out all those projects?
I think if you just don't have any more natural disasters, you'll be fine. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's pretty reasonable.
Okay.
We do have a pretty solid 5-year plan in place. So, and a lot of this is funded with capital funding that actually gets programmed. So you kind of have to spend it in a certain way. So I think that's part of the monitoring, is just seeing how we do over the next 5 years, and then evaluate from there. I do want to point out that the previous regional transportation plan, it was really hard to look at the projects that were identified there and see how they were doing now, because some of them were just not defined well, like the project descriptions and the road mile markers were off. And so I think moving forward, it's going to be much easier to look at this project list in 5 years and say, yes, check, 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 check. So I think county's positioned pretty well for that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I have one quick question. Thank you for this. And it's been really fun to watch your process over the past year, the way that you work. Sophia, thank you for your efforts on our behalf. Really appreciate both of you. So it's a 20-year document that gets updated every 5 years. My question is, will we be needing your help to update that, or does that get done just within our transportation department? We do it ourselves.
No, for the most part, rural counties usually go out and get consultants to do that work.
Okay. All right. Okay. So with that, we will open the public hearing, and the public in the room and on Zoom are free to comment on the document.
Good morning, Supervisors. John Brower from Junction City. The roads are one of the essential services here in Trinity County. But one thing that stood out to me is that I think it was a $270 million shortfall in funding to implement the 5-year plan.
That was 20-year plan, right?
Was it?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Okay. I was going to ask, how feasible is that plan? We're $1 million short per week, but perhaps it's more feasible and doable over 20. I hope so.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Board. My name is Chantel Estes, and I am the Program Manager for Trinity County Housing and Grants. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the transportation needs. We do have transportation options for those consumers that are already established, for agencies that consumers has signed up with. But my majority of clients I work with have not had the opportunity to sign up with different agencies that provide different transportation. Therefore, they depend on the transit tremendously to get to their AOD, formerly known as, alcohol and other drugs, or formerly known as SUD, which is substance use disorder, mental health, Medi-Cal, SNAPs, food stamps, known as, or probation clients, court clients, as well as medical doctors. So they depend on 5 days a week in order to get to these goals that different agencies and others have made for them. And without the transportation, they're almost set up for failure because they're not able to make either a treatment goal or a court hearing or different things that has come up. And I've played a role in this for the last year, and I've noticed a severe impact on when ones do get transportation and ones that do not. So I just would like to inform the board of the transportation concerns that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no other comment in the room. Any comments on Zoom?
I have no raised hands and no chat.
All right. With that, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Someone care to make a motion?
I'll just say something. I'd just like to thank Chantel for the job that she does. I see it all the time, every day out by the store, and you do great work, and we're thankful that that you're doing the work that you are. It's very, very helpful. A lot of people don't see it. It kind of goes under the radar, but I get to see it firsthand, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
So do we have a motion on this item?
Yeah, I will move that we approve as presented.
I will second.
So we have a motion from Supervisor Lutweiler, second from Supervisor Carpenter Harris. Heidi? I'm sorry, Ashley. I was writing. I think.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutweiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. Thank you both. Appreciate it. All right, county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order. Do we have any requests to change the order? All right. Item 4.1, discuss Trinity County's current fee waiver policy and provide direction to staff, no fiscal impact. I brought this item forward. I've noticed a number of times over the last couple of years that we have had items come to the board requesting that their fees be waived, and felt that there needed to be an updated look and a policy, do a little deeper dive into why we do what we do, where we're updating our fee schedule, looking closely at ensuring that the fees that get brought in cover the cost to perform that service. And then we have requests to waive those fees. And so to make sure that we have a policy that's relevant to our current situation. So council has assisted and provided a suggested document. I made one small change before bringing it for your input. But my request today would be that we discuss what I have brought to you and receive any comments that you would have that maybe need to be changed, added, deleted in any way. And then there would be then direction given to staff to take the policy that we have decided on and put a process in place. So with that, I would ask if the board members have any questions, and then we'll open for public comment. All right.
I do
Sure.
have one. I just want to make sure, because it says provide direction to staff. You're not asking for us to adopt this today. We're just, are you going to bring it back at a later point for adoption, or are you? I was just looking at the agenda. It doesn't have any action item in it that I can see.
Correct. So my thought would be that we make sure that we have the policy the way we want it. That's why I wanted your input. We give the direction for the procedure to be put in place, and we bring it all back and adopt it as a unit.
Okay.
Not that I want to, but is this something we should go over line by line?
We certainly can.
I mean, I may have some questions I'm not saying right now as we read through it, and last night, before I had a few questions. I don't know if you. if that
I
was on
would
purpose
say,
today.
let's have you take your questions line by line, certainly.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Actually, before we do this, if just any brief questions, I'm going to open it for public comment before we get into our deep dive.
So,
Open for public comment before we move into a deep dive of the document. Okay, so with that, I will open this for public comment. Any in the room? Okay, any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands. No.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment, and Supervisor Gogan. So the purpose, I think, probably is pretty clear, and I feel like I've explained that. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. Then the policy itself, except as otherwise provided by ordinance, county departments and offices shall charge all public agencies and nonprofit organizations the same filing fees and other costs as those charged to private citizens, where those fees are levied to offset the county's cost to provide related services. Fees may be waived for building permits, encroachment permits, variances, zone reclassifications, administrative permits, use permits, administrative hearings, or other county permits, only if the county administrative officer makes any one of the affirmative findings as specified below. So number one, the service requested is of need, and the levying of the fee in question would result in extreme financial hardship to the requesting entity.
defines extreme financial hardship.
So what in the past we have seen is that when hardship has been stated, that there needs to be some proof of that. My thought is that that would be taken on a case-by-case basis to understand the need and the hardship.
And my understanding too is that this would be part of what the process and would actually include, because there's other things too that Supervisor Gogan and I had questions on. It's like, well, how would this be determined? And I think that's part of, if we agree on this, then CAO can then work with the team to come back with, okay, and here's how we would actually process that and make that work to the point where, as it says in here somewhere, they would come forward with a recommendation that is based on all that. So I think great point that has to be worked out in the policy and process, I guess, is my thought. Does that meet with your expectation?
I think that a procedure would help clarify many of these items. I agree.
Okay.
I had a concern about the statement of extreme financial hardship as well, just out of a curiosity is how are we going to, how will we determine that? Because what's extreme to me may not be extreme to someone else. And so in that variability and kind of nebulous language, it seems like it could go like this. And then we worry about being fair and equal to all people, depending on what that extreme hardship looks like to them. And then also along that same thought, if someone's entering into business or if they're entering into a project of some kind and the permit itself is an extreme financial hardship, then maybe they need to rethink their project or their business plan, because I think that would be the first indicator that something's not on a positive path forward. So I was just worried about that determination, that determining factor. Pardon me.
Okay, good. So if we could just take a note on that when you're working through process. Okay. All right, number 2, the applicant has been avoidably detained due to actions taken by the county. And I think I added in the word avoidably. I think that the way it came by suggestion was the applicant has been delayed. Sometimes those delays cannot be avoided. And to me, there should be some room for that. So thoughts on that? Okay. Number 3, a facility or project proposed by a nonprofit corporation or special district will provide substantial public benefit to the population. So for consideration here, it's important to look at, are you going to consider it benefits the county as a whole? It benefits a majority of the county. It benefits more than one district. I got stuck in those thoughts.
And Chair, you did ask me to make a change to this section, which it didn't get memorialized in the one that's before you. You asked it to say, will provide substantial public benefit to the citizens of Trinity County.
Thank you.
So I just wanted.
I'm looking on the wrong.
No, I think
Thank
the wrong
you.
one is published, but that was the change you requested.
Okay, perfect.
So I guess
So could you just say that again?
So it would read, within the county of Trinity will provide a substantial public benefit to the citizens of Trinity County.
Okay.
I think your point was that you don't want to serve other jurisdictions. It's to maybe focus on this county's benefit.
I think the points that you were raising, I think are good ones, as well as in conversations I had, there could be a very underserved component of the county that is impacted by a particular situation. So it might not be broad, but it is a very specific and high need situation. So, and again, I think this is some back to that procedural stuff. That needs to be fairly well defined so that even the CAO, to the extent we're authorizing them to make some decisions, they have some ground to stand on instead of it's just a very vague thing that everybody can challenge.
Right. And the other piece of that that's really important to understand is that anytime, so in any department, let's just use the building department as an example. The fees that are collected and the cost that was incurred in order to provide those services have to zero at the end of any fiscal year. So if any entity comes and fees are waived for that entity, the onus of making up the difference in what then would be shortfall is going to have to be divided amongst the other applicants over the course of that year that needed to purchase a building permit. We need to be really clear that that was worth it to put extra burden on other people for whatever it was that, in other words, we need to look at it like, yes, we collectively all chose to spend our money on that. And then the weight of the burden is falling on those other people who are utilizing the service. So while it can on the surface look like, oh, that's a wonderful thing to do, we should definitely do that, there are unintended consequences that come from being very good-hearted that need to be carefully understood.
I have a concern about this area as well, and perhaps we can isolate it down to what you were speaking of, a tighter description of what benefit to the population actually looks like. Because I feel like I know as a person, the values that I hold in specific benefits in certain areas are going to be different than someone else's lens of what values and is beneficial to the population. And so I just always get a little bit concerned when making decisions that there could be a perceived bias or assumption of value. You know, if we're saying this is what looks like value to us, and so therefore it meets the bar. How do we kind of cut that up so that we can say maybe go to our general plan or maybe go to our governing bodies and say, what are values that represent our community? Is it activities for children? Is it activities for elders? And really kind of isolate that so that it kind of marries the benefits that we are kind of striving for as a community or as a county. I just would hate to get in a situation where, my values differ than the folks is even in the audience, I'm sure, as to what they see as a benefit. And so we need to isolate what that looks like so that we can hit it on the same mark every time.
So to tack on to that a little bit, a substantial public benefit to the population. So I guess that has to do with education as youth, and say, I'll just use this as an example. I teach 10 years old or 6 years old, a young man or woman how to use an axe or saw. And 20 years later, they become mill workers. And they are a substantial public benefit to our population. How far out does that youth thing go into actually being substantial? Not every kid you give an axe to is going to work at the mill. Not every kid you educate is actually going to stay with the education and become a public benefit. So it's hard for me to define a substantial public benefit, especially as you get into working with younger people. Are they, what delineates them actually being a substantial public benefit overall, we'll say in 20 years? Are they all going to go to Harvard? Are they all going to become loggers or work at the mill? So it's just hard for me to just classify that, especially as the age number goes down.
Well, maybe
No, I apologize. I was just going to jump in and say I'm reading it a little bit different. I think this is a wonderful discussion, but the way I'm reading it is that essentially, if you are a nonprofit or a special district that serves this county, you would qualify under this section. And when you're developing a nonprofit, one of the things you have to get declared by the Secretary of State is that you're a public benefit institution. So you've already had that declaration made. I did not anticipate that we would go off of that. The focus here would be, again, just to make sure it's serving this community versus another community. That would be, from my perspective, what the CAO and then the board would be looking at. But if you want something different, we can articulate it different. It's just that's the way I'm reading it.
I have a follow-up question on that. Just and first, I'd say I think the way that you presented it, Chair, is that what we're trying to do is have a more structured and defined process, in part because we've seen that a lot of waiver requests have been made. When that happens, somebody else is paying for that, and that we need to tighten that up and have clarity around it. Is that
correct?
Okay. So one of the things that just came to mind as you were talking about this, Margaret, is we're talking about in a nonprofit example that basically the county it almost seems like is gifting that nonprofit the funds because we're saying it's okay that you don't pay what normally you would have to pay.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Correct. Yes. So
Okay.
yes, that is exactly what it's doing.
And then are there legal limitations on our ability to gift funds to a public organization that we need to be considering here? Because this is new to me.
Absolutely. So there's always a consideration of what's called gift to public funds. But the standard is pretty broad for that. So you basically have to be able to tie to a public purpose.
Okay.
And by doing this in the form of a policy, you've created the findings to establish that. So all of this would be appropriate. But yes, the concepts you're talking about are absolutely accurate.
Thank you.
Good question.
I'm not personally, I'm not concerned about the way that's written because nonprofits and special districts and stuff, what comes to mind, that's how our fire departments are set up in Trinity County. That's going to be generally who's requesting these under that. It's simple for us to define what is a public benefit if it's a fire department, if it's somebody who's an ambulance district, those are public benefits. And those, I have no problem with how it's written.
Okay. I wonder if there's tighter language that can be applied to the type of public benefit that comes from a fire department or a service club. We see those kinds of fee waiver requests versus what is outside of that. I mean, that's an obvious public service generally. What about things that look like public services that don't necessarily serve everyone? And I don't know if language or if if trying to be that defined, it more goes into the procedure.
So we can define it as tightly as you want. We can specifically list the type of nonprofits. We can go as tight as you want. The concept, though, is to give a little flexibility. I think that is what my understanding has been the best practice in this county, is to have that ability to make the CAO or the board make that determination. But if you look at fee waivers, for example, the court has fee waiver processes. Theirs is very strict. If you meet this minimum income qualification, you have a certain number of people in your house, or if you receive Social Security or any other government assistance, you qualify. If you don't, you don't. And it's very, very finite. We can do something like that. It's kind of the board's pleasure. But that doesn't give any wiggle room or flexibility for unique situations. So it's really, this discussion is very good to find out what the board's pleasure. If you want us to make it stricter, we can come back with some very, fire districts and medical districts and, stuff. We can come back with more specifics on it if that's your pleasure.
How does the board feel about that?
I think that sounds better because I don't want to be like the conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but why don't we just say nonprofits don't have to pay for fees? Because if we have this as an option, then what's going to prevent every nonprofit in the region, regardless of where its mothership is, to say we're a nonprofit, we don't want to have to pay for fees? So we need to I just feel like we need to have some tighter perimeters and say we want to help our local volunteer fire departments or whatever that is, line those out, because there are some nonprofits that are incredibly wealthy, and we need to just sort of, make sure that we're isolating it down to the ones that are really struggling. And just, I agree, tighten the language.
And I would agree in kind of concept and philosophy as well. I keep thinking back to how you positioned it in the beginning, Chair, is that we have become more aware of departments that have allocated but unfunded positions that prevent them providing services to the county, right, which is in part driven by old fee schedules, which we're addressing, but old or new fee schedules, if we don't use them, if we give away the money, if you will, then we're just perpetuating the problem. And so there is very much a balancing act. And like you, I really feel like it should be true need, true exception, not a general practice that these are done. So if that helps in the creating new definitions and such, that's would be my input.
I kind of have to disagree a little bit with that. I get where you're coming from, but I do also think that, like, in regards to our volunteer fire departments, our ambulance services and stuff, whether they have money in the bank or not, I don't think that I would be willing to have a fee waiver schedule that said if you're a volunteer fire department, you don't have to pay for any county permits, because really it's the county's responsibility to provide the service they're providing the county for free. So I think that it's kind of incumbent on us to give our services that we're requiring them for free.
I think that within what I heard being stated, volunteer fire departments would definitely be in that list.
That's one of the main things for me is like our volunteer fire departments, especially, and I've filled out these fee waivers myself for Southern Trinity Volunteers when I was the chairman of that board. The money's there to pay for the fee, but it takes a lot of pies and cookies to come up with that couple $1,000s.
Right.
And the county is the responsible party for those services, and the way I feel. So I'm a little more lenient on waiving fees than some probably, but most of the fee waivers I've seen come through have been based on, it's been volunteer fire departments for the most part, and some others. There is a public benefit there, and like to have that gray area because we live in Trinity County and we don't know what's going to come up where somebody comes and asks for a fee waiver for something that we didn't even know was going to exist next year. So that's where I land is let's leave some leeway there where we can have some interpretation. The next board might feel differently than us. Our new CAO might feel differently than the one we have now. But there needs to be some wiggle room. We don't know what's going to happen next. So that's where.
That's fair.
I think the other thing that's happening here is that we're setting the guidelines under which the CAO may make a decision, but there also will in that process be an ability to appeal to the board in special circumstances. Am I correct?
Correct. That's the way it is written. And there are a couple different ways to do it. One being is that you kind of make things that are automatic grants. So for example, if a fire department, volunteer fire department comes, it can be an automatic grant. And then everything else can be discretionary at the pleasure of the CAO, appealable to the board. Or you can have it only these folks, nothing is really appealable beyond that, or you can have it open to discretion. So I'm hearing kind of the hybrid coming forward, which is we want to make sure there's certain entities. I'm hearing fire departments, ambulance service, usually nonprofits that deal with at-risk communities. Typically, those are ones you consider. Those may be kind of more of an automatic, whereas the other nonprofits have the ability to, apply for it. It's just on an automatic grant. But again, we're just kind of looking for some direction on that.
Sure. And I would say the service clubs that come forward that are doing events that are for the public generally could be in that list of automatic.